Revan, how you doing? You're muted at the minute. There we go.
I've been paying attention.
How you doing, bro?
I'm doing all right. I just had to mute your stream real quick. Sorry for that.
No worries, no worries. Always helpful.
Yep. So the question I had like earlier this month
Mm-hmm.
is do you something that I was thinking about whenever you were talking about the Djaradin and just like and the videos you made where you talk about how the Titans didn't create everything. They said they did, right?
Yeah.
And then it made me think about all the Titan Forged and how similar the Vrykul are to the Djaradin, and how there's lore about those two interacting.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you think that the Titan Forged were all basically originally Djaradin or other native elemental races that were, to put it into a Magic the Gathering term, like completed or transformed into,
Yeah.
or created into the forms they are now as Titans. And the gift of flesh was basically the old gods going, you're kind of back to how you were.
Yeah. Okay, so you bring up a very, very interesting theory that I know a lot of the people on Discord have been going through the motions as well. I see every once in a while this theory pop up in the lore discussions on Discord. The sort of chicken and egg theory, right? What came first?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you are correct. The Djaradin and the Vrykul, I mean, if they're not cousins, you can cut my dick off, right? They look basically the same. So they have to be to some extent, right? Now, first and foremost, let's just talk about why this theory is sort of being birthed now. In Tyr's writings, as well as in Odin's missives, Odin makes the claim that no one can argue that the Titans had created everything, because in truth, can anything truly be created if it was not ordered first? That's legitimately their argument for why the old gods had created nothing before the Titans arrived. Not that the old gods didn't create things, but that things can only be created if it's been ordered first. Now, I mean, anyone looking at that goes, nah, fam. Like, things can absolutely be created without being ordered, because ordered according to whom, right? That's sort of where that theory comes from. Now, I don't have much to add to your theory of the Djaradin and the Vrykul, because I actually do think that it makes almost more sense to me that the Titans arrived on Azeroth. They found beings of flesh, and we know that they don't like beings of flesh very much, because beings of flesh can't be controlled. And then they introduce order, right? So they order these beings, and this creates constructs. This creates beings that... And we also know that this is possible because Magni goes from being a fleshy human to a diamond. Right, so...
Also, sorry.
No, go for it, bro.
Oh, I was also thinking about how the Vrykul and the Broken Isles also become re-Titan forged via Odin.
Yeah, exactly that, right? So we know that by introducing order, you can take flesh to a more stone-esque kind of thing, and you can remove free will through the introduction of order. So we know that this is inherently possible. The curse of flesh, or the gift of flesh, because again, the Titans call it the curse of flesh, the old gods call it the gift of flesh. This suggests that perhaps everything we know about the start of our universe, or the start of Azeroth at least, is completely wrong. And that almost everything we see here, everything that we see here, was created by the old gods. The old gods created the Vrykul that would eventually become humans. They created the dwarfs that would eventually become Titan constructs and then become dwarfs again. They created everything. And the Titans arrived, turned these beings that the old gods had created, either by accident or perhaps on purpose, they turned them into their own constructs to fight their war against the old gods, because the problem the Titans had was they're more of a blunt instrument, and their blunt tactics would kill Azeroth before they could actually take care of the old god threat. So they needed smaller beings to sort of lead the army. And one of the problems they had with these smaller beings is if they just recruited fleshy things to go up against the old gods would effectively just corrupt them, right? So it would not be helpful. But if you remove the free will part, there's nothing to corrupt. You can't corrupt something that doesn't have free will, that is just a construct that does as it's told. And I think that might actually be how everything started. So I think you're onto something here. Which suddenly makes you question a whole lot of what we know about the early years and the early days of Azeroth.
Can I tack on? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. Please, dude, interrupt me when you have something to say. This is a conversation, and if you don't, I'll just keep fucking talking. So please.
Fair. So, something that I was thinking of, especially when we were talking about, like, the fleshy beings can be corrupted, it's almost a building off of the original question. Do you think the Keepers are also potentially created by the Old Gods, and they were similar to the generals of the Old Gods, and then they were transformed and ordered into the forms they have, or do you think that they're completely original? Because the Keepers bear remarkable similarities to other ordered creatures, like the Vrykul, and so on and so forth.
So the Keepers, you bring up now a very, very interesting thing. Tyr sort of throws a bit of a wrench in the works of a theory about the Keepers being natural in their first occurrence, because we have literally forged Tyr's new body. So for the Keepers, because of the immense power of that, because remember, every Keeper effectively acted with the power of the Titans. So Odin, for example, was gifted a hell of a lot of power by Aman'Thul in order to be Odin, right? So I would argue it looked something more like this. They ordered the beings of the and I think I should just I just want to lay this out before I continue. I don't think the Old Gods created mortal fleshy things because they wanted mortal fleshy things. I think it was literally created by accident. The Old Gods see 1,000 different truths, and so things would have been incredibly chaotic back then. It would have been, you would have had tentacle beings running around, you would have had beings running around with 5 eyes and 10 eyes and eyes where the mouth should be and the mouth is where the ears should be, and it would have been chaotic, much like when you look at the Old Gods. They are incredibly chaotic. A lot of what they have doesn't make a lot of sense. But then there would also have been beings that came out as normal, right? So beings that maybe look a lot like the Vrykul, and they sort of started their own civilizations and lived their best lives. And then the Titans arrive, and the Titans are like, wait a second, we need to take care of these Old Gods, so we're going to co-opt all of these fleshy things that aren't just complete messes, right? And we're going to turn them into stone things, remove their free will, but now we need generals for this army. Now, we're not willing to take the chance to lose our generals to the Old Gods, and so they will be made from stone in our image from scratch. It also happens to be maybe the reason why we've never actually seen a Titan Keeper gifted with the Curse of Flesh.
That makes sense, yeah. The
Right.
reason why I thought and even brought up the fact that Keepers could have been mortals or the equivalent of an Old God general is largely because you almost see something similar happen with the aspects of how the Keepers basically channeled Titan energies and blessed the aspects. So I was just thinking of how it kind of rhymes and could be because the Keepers did that. The Keepers are created by the Titans, and it could have been a similar process.
I mean, as I said, the only thing that would sort of destroy that theory is Tyr's recreation. The fact that we see the forge that created the bodies of the Titan Keepers in the first place, we're now using to recreate the body of Tyr. And funnily enough, the blueprints we found is an exact match for the body of Tyr. if you read Dawn of the Aspects, that's Tyr, right? It's Tyr in every single way, and that blueprint is literally, and I'm sure if we were to go look, we would find a blueprint for Odin, we would find a blueprint for Freya, we would find a blueprint for Loken, for every single one of the Titan Keepers, Raden. We would find those blueprints and we would be able to rebuild them. The question is, where's the soul of these beings, or where is their personality constructs? That we don't know, but the Forge, in my mind, is again sort of stolen technology. So the Titans use the technology from their sort of Zeroth realm. So we have Zeroth Mortis, we have Zeroth Ordus. So they use the technology from Zeroth Ordus to create this forge that would basically be able to replicate their Titan Keepers. Right, that would be my only... And again, I would argue it was to ensure that they don't lose their generals to the old gods. Because the generals are meant to lead the previous mortals, now constructs, in this holy war against the old gods.
That makes sense. Although, one thing that popped up when you were saying that is we actually have other instances of forges for the Titan Forged. Like, we have the big one in Ulduar. And while it hasn't been hasn't gotten much expansion since back in Wrath of the Lich King, we do know that they had a forge that created all the different Vrykul, the Mechanomes, and the Earthen, and then it got corrupted. So...
Yeah, but that's... we are told, again, that that's what that forge did. Right?
True.
That it created all of those things. We're never actually shown that it does do that.
That's true. I was just thinking something in terms of, like, Warhammer lore, where...
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the Necron Bio Transference?
In a sense, the way that they can literally just transfer into another robot body. So they don't actually die. They literally just transfer into another body if there is a body close by, I think.
So the Bio Transference was the original thing that happened. So how the the Warhammer Bio Transference went is their origin were the Necron tier. They had fleshy mortal bodies, and the Catan, which were their star gods and everything, tricked them into going into this Bio Transference, which basically rent their souls from them, and then basically stuffed all their consciousness in these like
metallic
the necrodermis or living metal bodies.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of, the more and more we've talked about the Titans, the more and more I'm reminded of the Catan almost, where it's they put the fleshy people through the quote-unquote biotransference ordering, and then once that was done, those souls and their spirit went into the construct bodies instead, but they're shackled, chained, and ordered. The Titans.
I will mention that the specifically with the Necron tier, their souls were devoured by the Catan.
Yeah. They in this case, I was more talking about with Warhammer with the shackled and everything.
Okay.
Sorry, Warhammer, Warcraft. But yes, in the terms of the Catan, they just they found that souls were delicious and went nom nom.
That sounds like a Catan.
But yeah, that's kind of where I just was drawing it, because like the forges and everything just reminded me so much of the biotransference that it feels it rhymes a little too much for me not to think of it as inspiration. And just the presence of the forges could be the ordering process and does not completely negate the fact that they could have just been forged these new bodies for them.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know why I never thought of it that way, but yeah, I mean, the Titans have never shown the ability to just do it, right? So they can't just speak a word and then turn the thing into a construct. But it would make sense. Their use of forges, their use of engines, even the soul engines that they have in ICC or underneath ICC, it makes perfect sense that the Titans would do this. Basically take these mortal beings, remove their, let's call it, personality construct, and then create a new body for it. But perhaps this new body doesn't allow for freedom so much, and this would then also explain why the old gods were able to corrupt, or well, the Titans call it corrupt, the old gods call it the gift, but basically re-gift them their flesh, this is another reason why I believe the old gods are very much misunderstood. Because the gift of flesh that was given to these Titan constructs didn't turn these mortal beings into servants of the old gods. If anything, based on Tyr's book, when the dwarfs finally got the gift of flesh, they left the battlefield. Yeah, they just fucked off. They were just like, all right, peace out, fam. And they ran, right? They were just like, we're done with this shit. We're going to the mountains. We're going to go mine shit because that's what we feel like doing. And they lost track of them because they did not want to be found. They didn't want to fight on the side of the old gods, nor did they want to fight on the side of the Titans. They just left. So clearly, the old gods are... I'm not saying the old gods are our friends, just to be clear. I think the old gods also have their own plans, and those plans will probably not involve what's good for us. But it is an interesting...
Taking away the Titan toys.
Yeah, I mean...
Taking away the Titan's toys and ability, and workforce means that they can't work as effectively, and, well, that's one rival gone with minimal effort.
100%. And I mean, it's no secret that World of Warcraft has always very heavily borrowed from Warhammer. So Warcraft, the original RTS, was actually meant to be Warhammer. Right? It was actually
and StarCraft was for 40k equivalent.
StarCraft was 40k. They couldn't get the licensing sort of hammered out and eventually decided, well, fuck it, we'll just make our own thing. And of course, Games Workshop went with another company that ended up not doing as good a job as what Warcraft did. But never you mind. At the end of the day, the influence is very heavily felt in both StarCraft and in Warcraft of the Warhammer influence. And I would not be surprised if that is... Of course, it's less grimdarky, which I think is also good, because I don't know if the grimdark would really fit with the World of Warcraft crowd. But so clearly the Titans didn't devour their souls, right? Because that would immediately make it a bit more grimdark. But I can
just
see
to chip in there a little more.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, bro.
What I'm reminded of is Necron nobility still have like their personalities, and they're all shackled to their higher ups in a thing called dynasty protocols, where each one had like the higher up the totem pole you are, the more of your personality you retain. And like the lower and lower you are, the more and more of it is shackled and everything. And it kind of... And if you think about how the Titan Forged and how they work as a whole, most of the Titan Forged, at least when we interact with them, have some semblance of personality.
Yeah.
So, and the higher and higher up the protocol we go, the more and more of their personality we have, just like Necron Dynasty protocols.
That's true.
And
very true, actually.
And it would actually explain why once let's say the Curse of Flesh just gets rid of these Dynasty protocols, just to keep up with the terminology. That would entirely explain all of the, actions of not only the Titan Forged back then, but also give semblances of how, like, Odin's Titan Forge work, where they still have personalities, they still have their opinions and everything. Yeah. It's just now subservient to a greater power.
Yeah. I can see that. I mean, because the thing is, the soldiers that's going to be on the front lines, marching to the old gods and to their... Because remember, they weren't in prisons at the time. They were marching on the beings and the creations of the old gods. And again, we have evidence that the old gods created beings of flesh, because we've seen the beings that the old gods have created. We've seen the generals that fight on the side of the old gods. And these were supposed to march. Now, the closer you are to the action, the closer you are to the corruption. So the last thing you want is a construct with a personality that can be corrupted and turned. So you basically make that construct a shell, right? Yeah, very limited in what it can do. It basically just reacts on the orders of the higher-ups. But your higher-ups don't have to have the same limitations placed upon them. Because for one thing, we know with Tyr, for example, when Tyr basically turned all of the proto-drakes that would eventually become the dragon aspects, the first time he took on Galakrond, he basically mind-controlled through the device that he had. He bound all of the proto-drakes to him, and he directed their attacks, and they got defeated swiftly by Galakrond, right? It wasn't until the proto-drakes were given freedom to fight as proto-drakes would that they ultimately managed to defeat Galakrond. And that might be the Titans may have figured this out long before the Titan Keeper tier figured this out. In order for generals to be effective, they need to have their own personality types. They need to be able to think for themselves a lot more freely. And this is also why we see someone like Odin going literally off on his own, creating his own heaven, his own hell, right? Completely independent from the natural cycle that is meant to exist, which, at least from what we can tell, the Titans do serve this natural cycle. But Odin has the ability to think for himself and go, nah, fam, I want my own army. I want my own hell. I will not let my people go to the Shadowlands. End of discussion. Right? Because that's sort of very far out of left field. But that would support your theory that they kept their personalities, whereas the rest of us, when we return into constructs, do not.
Yeah.
I can see that, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't even think about the Necron comparison until we started talking, and you're kind of just getting my live, pieces connecting, and it really does line up to a surprising degree, and it would make a fair bit of sense.
Bro, it's one of the reasons I love doing the Q&A as much as I do. It's exactly because of this. When I plan for a video, I obviously do the research, right? So I go through a lot of pages, I read a lot of the books, I reread a lot of the books, the specific chapters that's required for whatever video or theory I'm making. And then I make the theory, right? And I know exactly what it is. But when I do a Q&A, right, I have no idea what you guys ask. I don't know what the questions are. So you come in here, you ask your question, I have to think on my feet. Then you push back or you give a different perspective that then informs a different perspective for me. Right? And suddenly I'm now forced to think a little bit further, down one side or the other. That's one of the reasons I love doing this, because it forces me to think more widely than what I would do if I was just doing my own theory. Because my own theory, I just want to make a YouTube video, right? That's it. Whereas this, I'll sometimes say something and I'll go, oh my God, that was so profound. And then one of you guys go, but actually, what about this? And I'm like, shit. All right. Not as profound as I thought. Back to the drawing board. Let's go. So yeah, it's super fun to have these conversations like this.
Sadly, I think I hit the logical conclusion, and I probably should give other people space to talk. But this has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, dude. I had fun as well. I hope I answered your question, or at least gave you more questions to think about. I know you gave me
you totally did.
A couple of ideas here for future exploration on this topic.
One last thing is that I'm going to be keeping an eye out for is back in BlizzCon, they mentioned that they're going to be revealing the origin of the trolls.
Yep.
And I'm kind of curious if it'll tie into what we talked about today, and I'm really hopeful that we'll get more light on the subject. But
it has to. I just, before that is even announced, may I just say my theory is that the trolls were 100% created by the old gods. That is my theory. That has been my theory since Legion. One of the first 50 videos I made on my channel, I believe, was actually a video where the thumbnail was a giant face of Vol'jin and going, "Old God Servant," I think was the words next to it. And I went through this giant rabbit hole of explaining how the trolls are actually servants created by the old gods. So yeah, if that turns out to be true, I fucking called it. If it doesn't turn out to be true, I'm deleting the stream bot.
Don't even worry about it. Plus, it would actually go on to explain both Naga and Void Elves and how elves are surprisingly susceptible to Void specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean...
To be fair, that is a common trope in most fantasy, that elves are very self-indulgent or very susceptible to corruption. But I will say that you have a point with the Naga and the Void Elves.
Usually we only get one kind of knockoff for any kind of Void-related being. And elves, we're getting a surprise. We get two, and well, they're elves. We have 1 billion of them. But it kind of makes sense because it will not make sense, but sorry for that.
Go for
They're-
it.
But like, elves elves almost remind me of like the proto drakes and how they're able to absorb everything. But but with void, they fall way faster to that than any other magic. Like arcane, sure, but like it's weird that it happened twice. Is kind of the thing I'm getting at. And I'll probably have to think about this later.
No, I mean, the easiest way to explain that would just be they're magical creatures, and as magical creatures, obviously magic is going to have a more profound thing on them. The more, I think, correct way to explain it would be the fact that perhaps their origin is the reason why, because the same can be said for the Protodrakes. Protodrakes, also a very natural occurrence on Azeroth, also seem to have this incredible ability for absorption of magical forms. So it really doesn't matter which magical source it is. If you keep a Protodrake close enough to that magical source for long enough, it will absorb that magic and it will be able to use that magic. That's why you see different Protodrakes with different types of magical sources. You saw Foul Drakes, right? And Foul is not a natural occurring element on Azeroth, and yet those Drakes could use Foul because they had a close proximity to the Foul for long enough and they absorbed it. So it could be that natural creatures on Azeroth just had this ability to absorb, and not for nothing, but the Void very much is what's that? There's an ancient saying.
If you stare too long into the abyss stares back.
No. It's like a very ancient, it's like a Chinese proverb or something like that, where you can't fill a cup that's already full, kind of thing, right? It basically just means that those who already think they know everything can't be taught anything. But the void is empty, so it would sort of mean that anything that you put close to it, it will absorb, and it can just take upon itself. And therefore, creatures that's been created by the void maybe works in very much the same way. I can see that.
That goes on to Azeroth as a void-aligned being almost. If like all the naturally occurring species on Azeroth kind of have that property, and we go along with that.
Yeah, I think so too. I can't really add more to that because, well, we'll have to wait for Blizzard to add more to that, right?
Yeah.
To give us a little bit more insight. But right now, I think I'm well in agreement with your theory.
All right. Well, again, I already said I should back out soon. Thank you so much for the blast.
Thank you so much for the question, man. Really appreciate that. Take care of yourself, fam.
You too, man. Bye-bye.
Peace out, bro.